Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Budget and Finance Committee meeting for June 17th, 2019. I'm Paul Krikorian, Chair of the committee. I'm joined by my colleagues, Mr. Bonin, Mr. Price, and Mr. Blumenfield, and we're ready to begin today's meeting. We'll go ahead and start with public comment, and go ahead and take our general public comment first. So I'd like to ask Josephine Borchardt to come on up, and Genevieve Borchardt. And you have 1 minute for general public comment. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Josephine Borchardt, and I am a graduate student. I live with my two sisters, Genevieve Borchardt and Francesca Borchardt, and we live in Westwood, District 5. And we are in a damaged position right now where we are inevitably continuing to suffer damages as we are 4 months into a 2-year contract with our slumlord. I bring this to your attention today due to the Department of Housing and the Department of Building and Safety and their lack of response with our issues that we have. I came to the realization that my slumlord has bribed Christine Ridsky, senior housing inspector, and possibly others. Their supervisors are looking the other way as it comes to the uninhabitable issues that we are dealing with, and they need to have their salaries cut due to this.
And before you begin, also just for the record, Mr. Kretz has joined us now as well. So
yes.
Go right ahead. And I'm going to ask Mr. Kretz to have his staff talk to you as well. They're dealing with an issue in Council District 5 in Westwood.
So the entire department of the Building and Safety and Housing needs to be eliminated.
So did you want to speak as well?
We, the taxpayers, do not need to be financing these inept and incompetent people that manage services and departments that are supposed to better serve the community. To the contrary, they are causing damages like the ones they have caused us, such as delays, lost reports, misrepresentation of information and facts, taking inspectors off the case, and refusal to communicate, and most of all, allowing the slumlord to maintain conditions which are detrimental to our health. I implore that you as my councilman and the community's councilman take the serious action of this criminal behavior.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And so that closes general public comment. That will bring us next to our agenda-specific public comment. So I'd like to ask the speakers up for item number 5. Carrie Sutkin, Juan Corral, and Rachel Rose Lucky.
You don't have them contact. They just left.
All right. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, if
yes.
I may. I'm representing the Rampart Village Neighborhood Council on this matter, and I wasn't clear as to what my time allotment would be for today.
Did the Neighborhood Council submit a community impact statement?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Then I forget. Is it?
I don't know either.
Discussion of the chair.
Okay. Will 3 minutes do?
I think
Okay.
that's fine.
That'd be great. So why don't you start then with
Okay. Major increases in property value and property taxes are required to support this model, yet Councilman O'Farrell says taxes will not go up. Is he misinformed, or is he trying to pull the wool over our eyes? These kinds of increases are the most harmful to families already stretched to the breaking point. We should be trying to make it easier for folks to stay in their homes, not harder. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but Councilman O'Farrell's plan does not include, 1, protections for families along the river that make less than poverty level wages, nor protections for low-income residents from displacement. 2, transparent oversight. It lacks transparent oversight, but instead suggests that the mayor appoint people who are not beholden to voters. 3, neighborhood council involvement in the decision-making process. 4, it lacks a detailed program description. Blank checks are not acceptable, and this is exactly what his plan is. And 5, it lacks robust community participation and input. I know all of you did not like the new homelessness figures that just came out. It is short-sighted policies like this one that are major contributors to the low-income housing crisis. As of today, we need a ratio of 1 low-income unit built to every 1 market rate unit built just to keep up with the demand. We also know we need 600,000 low-income units built to get us out of the hole that we're in. Plain and simple, this is nothing more than another giveaway to predatory speculative developers in an attempt to drive out hardworking, low-income families for prime real estate. We need public housing. We need it like yesterday, and we need to tell Mitch O'Farrell to go back to the drawing board and come up with a plan that puts low-income families first, not predatory developers. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Corral, before you begin, if I can just take 1 minute. Members, just to be clear, do I have any speakers on items 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, or 13? Okay, seeing no speakers on those items, members, I would propose those items for consent approval. Item number 6, I'd propose that we note and file. Number 7, approve the motion. Number 8, approve finance's recommendations. Number 9, approve the city attorney's recommendations. 10, approve the draft ordinances. 11, approve the draft ordinances. 12, approve the draft ordinances. And 13, approve the draft ordinances. Any questions or concerns about any of those matters, members? That will be the action of the committee as to each of those matters. On items 1, 2, and 3, do I have any speakers on items 1, 2, and 3? Seeing none, comment on those items is now closed. Do I have any speakers on item number 4? Seeing none, comment on that matter is now closed. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry for that brief delay. Mr. Corral, go right ahead.
Yes, my name is Juan Corral. I'm a concerned citizen, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how this item is not appropriate for the community. Talking to different people, everybody, and I know about it, that the tax component is not going to go up. That's no new taxes. However, there is a component in which we are very worried that there's a lot of infrastructure in the city that needs funding, and for the increment of these taxes to be used for this particular item that is not cleared, that is not outlined in detail exactly how it's going to affect the communities, seems to be inappropriate at this time. In addition to, we already know that we do have a homeless problem. We already know that we do have an affordability problem. What's going to keep the city from actually upzoning some of these single homes and creating into developments so they could increase the tax increment, because it's going to be a responsibility based on tax increments. So for the parent, for somebody that has a home, a single family home, how is the city going to address that? At this point, I believe that this is not correct for the city.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Carrie Sutkin, and I'm here as a concerned resident, citizen, but I'm also a planner, and I've been involved in the kind of shutdown of redevelopment through an oversight committee in several cities throughout LA County. And I'm aware that the EIFD is really kind of like an attempt to kind of bring back redevelopment, but the way the state intended it was supposed to be very targeted for one site or one catalytic project with 1 or 2, maybe a brownfield or so. And I think the way the city is considering this is just like a way to finance the LA River Revitalization Master Plan is not the wise way to go. It's too much of a reach. It potentially could include, 32 miles with 2 miles on either side and still not fund every single item in the master plan, because we don't need every item in the master plan, and many of these are already proceeding forward with other funding sources because it's outdated. This, I think, was an idea like maybe in 2007, and it got kind of rolled into something bigger. But I agree with my colleagues here. We've spoken to many neighborhood councils out in the community, and there's a lot of fear about people losing their single-family homes and using eminent domain and redevelopment and increase in property value that would then displace a lot of us who are there on a very middle-class income. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate your input. Okay, are there any other speakers on item number 5? All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment on that item as well. So, members, that will then take us into our closed session items. And, since we already did consent, I guess we can stay. Well, you know what? We'll go into the other room for the closed session items. So we'll start with number 1, unless City Attorney has any other requests. We'll go ahead. All right, good afternoon. Thanks for your patience, everyone. We're back in session, and let's go ahead and take up item number 5, please.
Item number 5 is Chief Legislative Analyst reports relative to Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District Establishment Policy and Public Financing Authority appointments.
All right, and if there's no objection, members, I'm going to reopen comment to allow Mr. O'Farrell to come on up and provide his perspectives on this.
I object. You object?
Do you
Okay.
object specific to Mr. O'Farrell,
You
or
need to-
is it a general matter?
Do you need to write a dissenting opinion here? No, thank you. Thank you.
afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues. So what you have before you is the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District Establishment Policy for the City of Los Angeles, not any one district, just the adoption of the policy. And it's something that we all know a thing or two about, because back in 2015, this council supported the study that I introduced specific to the river. That study was completed. Since then, the framework has gone through Economic Development Committee and has been adopted. Back in the day, the report was concurrently requested to develop the framework for the citywide policy, which is, as I said, what's before you now. What I'm looking forward to, specific to the river initiative, is to introducing a resolution of intent for the river EIFD, so that we may, so we can cease that ad hoc approach to doing projects at the Los Angeles River. For example, we acquired Parcel G at Taylor Yard, and that was what was it, Christine? $60 million for the acquisition of that. And then with that, we had to work out a deal for the brownfield remediation. So that's just the Enhanced Infrastructure District that is important in the 13th District. I know there are others, for example, on the west side. But we can't even have any arguments about what they look like until we adopt the citywide policy. So that's really what this is all about. Once we establish a district anywhere, it can also be used for a variety of things, low and moderate income housing, which Mr. Blumenfield and I talked about when we were both on the River and Parks, Recreation and Parks Committee, and that is baking into the plan monies that will go toward low and moderate income housing along the Los Angeles River. They can also provide a match for infrastructure projects such as bridges, remediation of contaminated locations, and then habitat restoration. So just approving this policy doesn't approve any one project, including the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District at the Los Angeles River. But what it will do is it will help enhance and further the long-term visions we have once we can implement these locations across the city or wherever we see fit to do them. It's a lot more nimble than the previous, the CRAs, what they were able to do with the Tax Increment Financing District. It won't generate as much revenue, and it is only revenue that would take a small fraction of increased incremental increases for after a real estate transaction has taken place into the future. And it could be bonded against for up to 45 years lifetime would be up to 45 years to pay back a bond. And so that's what this is for. It's a policy so we can start triggering these and get them going where they make sense. I will say that the whole idea also, I think the intent of this state law was to be able to do careful planning and sound investment for projects that otherwise would not come into reality. And I know for the Los Angeles River, that's certainly a concern. We've had so many goals and visions and master plans, and we know what we want to do, but we know that we need more than 60 million here or 5 million there or 500,000 there. We need a really concentrated effort at getting real funding to restore the habitat and do some infrastructure improvements at the river. So I urge for you all to support approving the policy so we can start effectuating these initiatives.
Very good. Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Farrell. So let's go ahead and invite up the CLA now to present on this. Mr. Wickham, welcome.
Good afternoon. Let's see, maybe EWDD might join as well. I'm not sure if you need too much detail on what EIFDs are or if you want to get directly into the recommendations from our CLA report.
You might give the
Overview.
30,000-foot version of it. We don't need to go into great detail, except we will probably in response to questions.
Okay. So as Councilman O'Farrell indicated, EIFDs were created as a tool to help with the development of resources in communities. They would be targeted similar to redevelopment of old. And this is a new tool using property tax increment as the funding source in order to provide for the improvements that would be identified. The jurisdiction would create an agency, a financing agency that would have elected officials and public members sitting on the panel who would make the decisions. It would be an independent body that would govern the EIFD and make decisions about which projects would be funded. There's a wide range of projects that can be funded, including child care facilities, libraries, parks, recreation facilities and open space, highways and streets, flood control, sewage, solid waste projects, brownfields, very low, moderate income housing. So it's really a broad range of projects that could be funded in the project area. The trick is that the funding is, again, property tax. And as you know, property tax is distributed to cities, counties, and then any special districts. So for us, the City of Los Angeles, that's primarily City of Los Angeles and the County of Los Angeles. The big value for the city is bringing the county on board to provide a portion of their property tax as well. And that really makes a big difference in the amount of funding that would be available in a project area, an EIFD that you would create. And so the county has adopted a policy. They are positioning themselves to participate in EIFDs with local jurisdictions. They have not done so yet. There has been one EIFD created in Los Angeles County in the city of Laverne, and the County of Los Angeles has expressed interest in that, but they have not yet joined on that. So let's see.
Just on that one point, the county's effort to create EIFDs is, the discussion at least has been that county EIFDs would be contingent upon the city, the impacted city also participating with their tax increment as well.
Exactly. Okay. And I believe it would be a negotiated amount of property tax that each jurisdiction would provide, but I think we're looking at everybody putting in an equal percentage. Right, so everybody's kind of like trying to be fair in what they're putting into it. Okay. The county does have a requirement that any EIFD they participate in must include a 20% affordable housing provision. So there will be a requirement that funds be dedicated to the construction of affordable housing. So that would be something I believe the city would be very much in line with and supportive of. So that's consistent with all of our goals. That's consistent with what redevelopment agencies had done previously. So what you have in front of you is the formation policy that EWDD had prepared. They hired a consultant, I believe, who worked with them to create a structure. That formation policy came forward to the council for consideration. CLA reviewed it and had a number of revisions, a few minor revisions, such as we recommend that the initiation of the formation action begin with a council motion. We were concerned that departments or others would go out and start racing without anybody knowing what was going on. And we felt it was important that the council actually pass a motion that initiated the process so that you would know what's happening on this, because again, this is property tax increment, this is property tax general fund money that would be going into the EIFD. We felt it was important the council understood what kind of budget impacts there might be down the line before it got too far. The other is that, let's see, the other concern we had is in the formation of the PFA, the finance agency itself. State law indicates that if it's only the city of Los Angeles participating, that there would be 3 council members on the board plus 2 public members. There is a provision in the city charter that governs how council members can be appointed to independent boards, and in conversations with the city attorney, we felt it was important that the council include in this policy a clear statement that the elected officials who sit on the EIFD be appointed by the mayor, so that is fully in compliance with the city charter, and that the public members be appointed by the city council. So that way both the mayor and the council have an ability to appoint members to the PFA, and we are consistent with the requirements of the charter. And so that's kind of really the nutshell. There's a lot of detail that could go into this, and I don't know, maybe Daisy with EWDD has any more details. I'm not sure.
No, that's pretty much it. And I just want to emphasize that this is a policy to establish or to basically to enable economic and workforce development to do the assessments and the feasibility studies that are needed to make a recommendation of council. So it's a matter of once we have a recommendation, we'd come back for your consideration and approval.
Okay. Yeah. So a couple quick things. On the 20% affordable housing mandate that the county's talking about, I assume you mean only as to housing projects, because the range of this could apply to many things, public infrastructure, it could apply to many things beyond housing projects. Are they limiting the use of EIFDs only to projects that include housing?
No, but the EIFD must, 20% of the funds, if is my understanding, must go to affordable housing. You can use the funds on all the other things that you want to do in the EIFD, but there must be a housing component in the project.
So if you were using EIFDs for a stormwater recapture open space park, you would still have to set aside 20% to invest in affordable housing.
You would.
On that site, or presumably, or?
Somewhere within, it depends on how you structure the EIFD, because there are some proposals that would be very specific to one parcel, but there have been a number of proposals put in by council members already that have indicated a much broader area, such as the LA River EIFD would cover the entire length from Boyle Heights out to Canoga Park. Or the San Pedro would be the full waterfront area. So they are being, in Venice, I believe, was a much broader area than just one specific parcel. So I think, again, with the county, that is a policy. If we did go in with an EIFD for a very focused area, it would probably be negotiable I wouldn't, I wouldn't say it's locked in. We would have to negotiate the property tax contribution from the county anyway, and that could be a factor that would be in the negotiation.
Okay. So would it be your recommendation that a city EIFD policy would also require county participation before in any project that we were to move forward on?
That was not a recommendation of ours. I highlight the fact that you already have control, the budget committee, the city council already has control over your property tax revenue. And so you can do whatever you need to do with that money, and you make budget decisions with that funding all the time. In order to really get a boost for an EIFD, that boost comes from having the county then
using somebody else's money.
Or using somebody else's money.
So that's what I wanted to drill down on a little bit, because, I think initially a lot of us thought of this as an alternative or a replacement to redevelopment. And as Mr. O'Farrell touched upon, and as you touched upon, it doesn't nearly produce the degree of revenues that redevelopment did, obviously. But if we were to create EIFDs only with the city's tax increment component, without including county or others, essentially we would be taking anticipated general fund tax revenue and spending it on things with additional expense, administrative expense and so on, that it costs to create an EIFD. That would be a normal budgetary decision that we would make, as we do with all of our other general fund revenue. What would be the advantage of setting up a district to spend our own tax money, other than the fact that we can bond against it? I guess that's the main.
Yeah.
That there's certainty for the bonding market, that once there's a designated stream of tax revenue set aside for that, you can create certainty to bond against.
You certainly have bonding tools available to you now. You have MICLA.
I mean, we've
right?
done it in the past, right?
Right. So that, I think the main benefit there is that if you have an independent EIFD, then the bonding obligations are on them, not on the city. So therefore, your bonding, your bond caps, your bond limits that you have in your budget to ensure that you're not going too far out of line, are not targeted.
Yeah, but the reason that we have that is so that we don't overspend on anticipated future expenses. It's so that we're not overspending our credit card account. So this would be the equivalent of adding an additional credit card so that we don't overspend the first credit card.
But it's not on your books, and there's no recourse to you.
But it is. We're paying for it with our tax revenue. With it's not on our books if the county is chipping into it. But if it's only us chipping into it, it's 100% general fund tax revenue that's going to pay for the second credit card.
Right.
Right? What am I missing on that?
Okay, but something to consider is that the tax increment wouldn't happen if it wasn't for the improvements done through the EIFD. So there is going to be an increased tax base, but it wouldn't be there without the improvement. So you got to look at it that way as well. And also the recommendation is to limit it to the 50% of the tax increment. So there would still be, the city would still be receiving increased tax base, tax increment, and also would have the benefit of the EIFD.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we'd be getting 50% of the 100% that the city would normally receive. See, the great thing about redevelopment is it functionally served as a subsidization by the state of redevelopment projects that would not be built otherwise, because they were in blighted areas, they were areas that didn't attract private investment. I mean, that was the beauty of redevelopment. But and I'm not saying that we should, because we could create this policy in a way that is limited to only those circumstances where we're also getting other people's tax increment as well, and I think we should. But but if it were only limited to the city's portion of the property tax increment, even if we're limiting it to 50%, I mean, it's all our money in the first place. So we could pay cash for these things. We could dip into the general fund reserve. We could, bond against, MICLA or other things. it adds a little bit to our ability to make upfront investments and stretch the costs over the long haul. But it may or may not be a fiscally prudent thing to do that as well, since the only thing that backing it is our own general fund revenues.
And part of the assessment that we would do is that, bring back information and present it to you as far as whether it makes fiscal sense to do it. So
Right.
again, this is just a tool for us to even start. It's the first step for us to start doing the assessments.
That allows you to have the conversations with the county.
So
And-
when the feasibility report, for a particular project, we adopt the policy today, we move forward. The next step then is that any given project that's going to be proposed to use EIFD financing is initiated by a council motion. Then there's a feasibility report, right, for that project.
So we would first do a preliminary assessment and come back and present whether it's feasible. And you'd make the decision whether you'd want to move forward with the actual feasibility study.
Okay, so motion's introduced, initial analysis, then the council decides whether to move forward with a feasibility report. Feasibility report is done that is going to take into account, I assume, I hope, the issues of whether there's return on investment,
Correct.
whether there's job creation, what the anticipated revenues are that will be derived that wouldn't be derived but for this project.
Correct.
Tying it to maybe our jobs creation strategic plan, and all of those sorts of things will be part of the feasibility report.
Yes, it would.
Okay, so then that comes back before presumably this committee,
Yes.
and then the council to determine whether or not a particular project provides benefit to justify the investment of the tax increment.
Yeah.
Correct.
And that would be the project area. The PFA, the members appointed to the PFA would make the decisions about which projects actually get funded, not the council.
Okay.
Right. So it's an entirely independent body, just like a JPA. So the authority for the projects is transferred to the PFA.
Okay, but so is the feasibility study then related to, is it project specific or is it area specific or is it both?
Depending on the proposal. So if there is a very specific, like we were discussing earlier, if there's just one parcel with one project, then you would know what you're buying with that. If you're doing a broader area, then the feasibility study would identify types of projects, and it may have specific projects included in it. But at the end of the day, once you've created the PFA, they would make the decision about which projects in that area would receive the funding.
Okay. For myself, I think I think having the council at least have some degree of certainty going in about what the projects are that would be proposed and what their economic benefit is kind of critical to our performing our role of expending general fund revenues. But Mr. Bonnet.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the line of questioning. I wanted to follow up on one thing because I maybe I misunderstood your answer or I've misunderstood how this works from the beginning. One of the two is in response to Mr. Krikorian's question about how if the county's not involved, it's just all our money. Anyway, you seem to indicate that the tax increment wouldn't exist if we didn't do the EIFD. The way I always understood this was that we're not putting new taxes on the properties in the area. It's just from the point at which we establish the EIFD, a portion of the sort of natural tax growth gets set aside.
Correct.
That's correct. Okay.
And I guess the theory, and I think the practice to a certain extent, is that if you create parks, or if you create a library, or you build housing, you will actually be positively affecting the property values in the area, and that will add additional property.
Can I follow up on your point about the natural? Because I didn't think it was the natural growth.
Right.
It was not the natural growth, but it is what's above and beyond the natural growth.
The valuation that increases because of the infrastructure investment.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Got it. So my other question is John, when you started, you outlined the broad range of things that were eligible for EIFD projects. Looking at your report, it sounds like the county has dramatically narrowed that pool of eligibility to affordable housing, homeless prevention, workforce development, or sustainability.
I'm not sure why they limit it that much. I don't know if they believe that they're going to be directing their funding to that portion of an EIFD, and then the rest of the funding can go wherever it goes. So we should seek some clarity on that. Their policy came out before there were some revisions in the law, so it may be that they don't necessarily reflect that as well. But that would be a serious limitation in the ability to use funding and the value of the county contribution.
It would be a serious limitation, perhaps, for what Mr. O'Farrell wants to do, certainly for what I'd be looking to do. And we need some clarity on that, whether or not they would contribute to a project that goes beyond that. Because what I've discovered with Measure H is if it's outside the parameters of their homelessness strategy, they ain't paying a cent. So, we're not getting a lot for encampment stuff because that wasn't part of their homelessness strategy. And I think we sort of need to know before we make proposals whether or not it's in the realm of possibility or whether we need to go back to the county and see if we can renegotiate this. Because, maybe a lot of infrastructure stuff falls under sustainability, but I don't know how they define that.
Yeah.
The next question I had was, the composition. The state has pretty much dictated the composition of these boards?
Yes.
I think it's an unfortunate composition. I can imagine a lot of neighborhoods that might be suspect of the city doing something like this and are not going to be at all placated by the idea that it's going to be 3 council members, 2 of whom they've never seen of or heard of before.
Yeah. And again, we looked at it long and hard with regard to which council members could be appointed and how that appointment process goes. And there's an odd provision in the charter, and it really restricts how it can go about. So, it would be very helpful if the mayor took it upon himself to ensure that the council member in the project area that represents that project area is appointed. But there's no way to actually enforce that.
Mandate that. Just the council members outnumbering the members of the public, I think, is going to be an issue for some. Although when it's public dollars, there's certainly a rationale for that. But here's the question: you've got 2 public members on here. Let me sort of argue it from the other side. 2 public members on here. The council members may have in the next few months some very strict limits on them in terms of contributions from developers. The 2 members of this might be making, the public members might be making some very significant decisions over stuff that is of similar significance. What are the ethic requirements on public members?
I would say we would have to consult with the city attorney's office to make sure that we're in compliance and that we have policies on what will be required.
Yeah, there's what the city attorney may say would apply, and then there may be a higher standard that needs to apply in this case.
Right. We may need, we would want probably the same provisions that are in place for commissioners. But again, since this is an independent outside entity, the city may not be able to apply its ethics rules. So it may be the state law regarding ethics, govern in this case.
I would say that we could make it a requirement of our contribution of dollars that there be that kind of disclosure built in.
The PFA adopts such
and the
guidelines.
mandate of who the council chooses to appoint.
Right.
Like the list of eligible appointees is limited to those who meet our requirements.
Yeah. I mean, we might look at the requirements for Metro, AQMD, Coastal Commission, other boards where public members sit and make significant weighty decisions.
Right.
And I guess that was all my questions.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Price.
Thank you. Thanks for
Second time around for you on this.
Yes,
Mr.
thanks
Price.
for the report. Again, it was adopted by the Economic Development Committee as with the recommendations of the CLA. and we realized that it was an exciting tool, but still fraught with, the details. And many of those concerns have been raised by my colleagues already. It doesn't matter if the project is at the river, or San Pedro, or South LA, or the Valley of Venice. I thought that there was a requirement for the county involvement. Now, you're saying it's sort of optional, that the county may or may not be involved. If it is, there's some good things, there's some good points of collaboration, but if there aren't, then everything is on the city, basically. Is that?
Precisely, yeah. The county is not obligated to participate in any way. And by the way, I forgot to mention that schools are not allowed to participate in any way. So school property tax revenue is off the table entirely. It's only the county, the city, and there's a tiny little bit of special district that might be available from us, but it's inconsequential at this point. But it is the option of the other end of any entity to participate. It's not an obligation.
Mm-hmm. And is there a timing issue involved here? Is there a time limit for the duration of the EIFCs, or
not to create one?
Like
no, we don't. We're not under any time constraints in order to create one. But is there a time limit on the life of one? It might be up to 45 years. Would be the life of a.
Well, I definitely am supportive of adopting a policy. Obviously, the devil is in the details, and so I think we need to look at it real closely and see how we can move forward. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Great, thank you. Glad we're moving this issue, and Mr. Farrell, thank you so much for your leadership on this and vision to ultimately see something happen at the LA River, because I think that's essential. This is not doing that, as we know. This is just generally setting the policy, but I know that your North Star is looking at that river as one of the ways that we can benefit. I did have some questions in terms of the details, and one, just on the PFA, the group is very narrow. You said 3 members have to be from the city, but if it's a city-county, are there a certain number of members have to be from the county as well?
No. But that will be an interesting question. How many members will they want? Will they want the same number of members as the city? And so that will be part of the negotiation, the discussion. My understanding from a presentation made in Economic Development Committee is that there's the city of Placentia is considering the formation of an EIFD, and in their board they have 2 council members and 1 county member. So it may be that would be the way it would work.
That's the whole city, though, correct?
I'm not sure if it's the whole city of Placentia or if it's a portion of Placentia. But if you remember, there are 15 city council members and there are 5 members of the Board of Supervisors.
Right.
And so if they are on every EIFD that's formed in the County of Los Angeles, they may be very selective in which EIFDs they join.
And that would also depend on, is this the kind of body that you can have an authorized alternate or an appointee, or someone on your staff represent you?
Currently not. State law does not allow that right now.
Okay, so that's something that we could lobby to change in terms of being able to have
Yes.
some ability. And there's always some ways around that. You could have committees of the whole meet more regularly and then have the committee meet. But I don't need to get into the details on that at the moment. One tricky part of all this is determining the tax increment. You have actual growth minus natural growth equals this tax increment. How do we know how much of the incremental growth in an area was generated by the catalytic project? I.e., how do we determine that seemingly simple formula, but is very complex?
Yeah, I'm not certain. We would need to talk to some consultants who have done this type of work for redevelopment project areas and see how they would approach a methodology. It must at some point be mechanical for the county in order to decide how much money from any piece of property goes to this pot or to that pot.
Because this was one of the problems with the CRA, is that there were a lot of arguments about whether the tax increment was truly linked to to that delta between the actual growth versus the natural growth.
Yeah.
I don't know that that was ever solved then, and certainly it hasn't been solved now, but I just highlight that as a tricky part that we need to deal with.
And it may be that the way you smooth that is by setting a policy that no more than 50% of the tax increment is available to the EIFD. So you may not be able to draw the distinctions that you're talking about, and so you come up with something like 50% or 70% or 20, whatever it is. So.
And then it also depends on, it's a little tricky because the catalytic projects that are causing the tax increment that have to be bonded again, the tax increment has to be bonded against to build the catalytic project.
Yeah.
But when we agree to do the bonding and we agree to give our tax increment to this third independent party, we don't know what that project is, and we have no authority on it.
Yeah.
So they could, if we don't write this correctly, they could do things that have no catalytic value.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also tricky with, some of the values that we have. We want affordable housing, but, or permanent supportive housing, but that is not something that typically generates increased tax increment.
Yeah.
Arguably, maybe it does a little bit, but a lot of folks will argue sometimes it does the opposite.
Yeah.
Even though it's a value that we all cherish here, we want to see that put in there. So I don't know how to reconcile that in this policy, because if we were to bond, make a certain assumption, even if it's 50% of growth, and then all that money goes into affordable housing, there's not going to be any delta between the actual growth and the natural growth.
Mm-hmm.
How do we deal with that?
Yeah, I think that'll be part of the analysis that is done on the fiscal viability, feasibility of the project area. And just one thing to note about the bonds is current law requires a vote of the property owners in the EIFD district. If you are going to bond, you need to go to those property owners to get their approval to bond, right? And you need 55% of the property owners in the district to approve that question.
Even if you're not changing the
Yes.
the tax rate at all, you need the geographic area to determine the
Whether you can bond or not, yes. There is a proposal in the state to eliminate that requirement, and so that is pending in the legislature, so that the PFA can make the decision on its sole accord to go to bond. But currently, there's a requirement for the owners to vote.
And then, in terms of the goals, sometimes I get concerned with some of our existing tax policies, hotels, convention centers. We don't always have clearly defined goals as far as what the incentives should be. With the proposed EIFD policy, it says that the goals of the EIFD must be aligned with the city's economic development strategy. But that's really broad goals like job creation, which seems like everything could be applied to. What do we have to make sure that when we create the EIFDs, we set those goals as catalytic projects?
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, this would be part of the analysis that we do. We'd make recommendations based on what the area, it's really hard right now, everything we would present to you is speculation, because we don't have specific projects or specific areas that we have looked at. So again, as the recommendations come forth, that's when we would make the
You're talking about the recommendations for the actual EIFDs?
Yeah.
As opposed to the policy that we're setting now.
Right.
Should we have something in the policy that says that the goals should at least be defined in terms of the catalytic nature of them and the expectation of the tax increment? Is that something
I think
that would make sense, or would that add too much?
It might constrain you in ways that wouldn't be helpful. So an EIFD for Venice would be very different from an EIFD for the LA River, which would be very different from an EIFD for downtown. And so keeping that discussion within the the context of the IFD proposal itself allows you to be creative in meeting the broad needs of the city without constraining that too much upfront.
Right. And are there any limitations in terms of where the geography in an EIFD would be? You know, and the concern is, we want to avoid making a well-off area and diverting funds from the general fund in a well-off area that, you know, robbing Paul to pay Peter as opposed to Peter to pay Paul.
There is no, there are no criteria of that nature. There is one rule concerning former redevelopment areas that they can be included, but you cannot use that property tax increment until all of the former redevelopment area bonds have been paid off.
Say that again.
You can't use any of the tax increment from that former redevelopment area until that former redevelopment area has been paid off.
So some of these current redevelopment areas have another 15 years on them, right?
Yeah.
So that would mean, and those are all by definition, or theoretical definition, those are blighted areas.
Yeah.
So does that not disadvantage our blighted areas? And
It might be an issue. And so again, when there's a financial analysis that must be taken into account, I know
that may hurt the LA River EIFB too, because there is a redevelopment zone that goes on the headwaters of the river, a part of it, in the Reseda-Canoga Park. So
yeah, HRNA when they
like, I understand not using the increment that's already been dedicated.
Yeah.
But that, I guess it was when it went dead in July of 11, there was still another, how many years? 15, 20?
Yeah. But the tentative analysis or the initial analysis that was done by HRNA for the LA River actually took that into account. So that is on the mind of the firms that are doing this work. And it is a constraint, but it doesn't seem insurmountable. But that's something you would definitely want to look into when a detailed project comes forward.
Okay. And then how does this interact with our zoning policies and other issues? Because it could go both ways in a sense, like if we have this tax increment in some areas, we want to generate growth, the city needs to have the appropriate zoning to have that growth. So the way the city, whether the city goes in one direction or another direction, could have a dramatic impact on the ability to capture that tax increment.
Yeah. There are no land use authorities attached to the EIFD.
Right.
So it would have to comply with the underlying land use approved by the city.
So I guess the city still has ultimate control on any sort of zoning issue. And I think that's important for folks to realize. But in order to be able to capture some of this revenue, depending on what it is, the city needs to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's my questions. Mr. Kretz?
Yeah, just one question. What would motivate the county to give up their revenue to something like this?
I really don't know. I guess it would depend on the proposal that the city was putting forward. And it would be incumbent upon the city to work with the supervisors and county staff to bring them into the project. And nobody's done it yet. Out of the 4 or 5 that have been created, no county has joined in to an EIFD yet. So we're anxious to see who succeeds in that regard and learn from their experience.
And the good thing is at least they have policy in place, so that means that they're willing to actually consider the formation of the EIFD, so that's a good sign.
But we don't really have a sense yet of what would actually pull them in.
No.
Can I follow? Wouldn't it be the same thing that pulls us in? I mean, on the river, they're committed to seeing river projects. On housing, they're committed to seeing housing projects. It's our overlapping constituency, so that as long as they have the same control we do over this entity, they're getting to spend our money just as much as we're getting to spend their money. Unless am I misreading that? I mean, that would be the motivation, which is they're leveraging their dollars just like we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess if they see the same value in it, then that we do rather than just spending it on their own, which tends to be the way a lot of governments work. So I'm somewhat skeptical.
But they want to take our money is the issue. Just like
Yeah,
they
I
wanna
guess
take
we
their-
both want to
Yeah.
redouble our efforts in a perfect world if everything works out correctly.
Well, yeah, and that is exactly what it is, because, what this boils down to is an expenditure of tax revenues for a given purpose. With redevelopment, it's generally been blight reduction and anticipated increase in revenues from elimination of the blight and replacement with a more positive revenue-producing, job-producing, economic activity-producing development. And if both the county and the city are investing their revenues in doing that, there is leverage. There's, 50% leverage in that. So there's a increased return on investment for each of us in doing that, it seems to me. Without that, I see some benefit in the bonding ability, but there's also cost in administrative costs and so on, which I just was looking quickly at that in the county policy. I think it's their idea that all administrative costs would be captured by the district and borne by the district.
Yeah.
Right? So have we looked at all at what kind of administrative obligations the city would have in relation to administering EIFDs? And if so, that would be fully borne by the district, I assume, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely something that needs to be part of the feasibility analysis. Because if you're making loans, you are going to need staff who are going to service those loans. You're going to need staff who are going to be managing payments. You're going to need staff who are going to negotiate deals. So there will be some kind of a staffing load required here, as well as somebody who's going to manage an EIFD. But what that all entails, I don't believe we have any analysis of that. It may be the EWDD plans to include that in their analysis.
Yeah, that would be included. Right now, again, we don't have enough information, and that's what the analysis would be for. It would depend on how many EIFDs are formed, how, the size. So there's a lot of variables that we would need to look at based on a site-specific or project-specific basis.
And when you start getting in the details, you'll have the question, is the city attorney providing legal services? Or if it's a city-county joint EIFD, then will the county be providing the legal services? And right, so you have all of those types of administrative components that need to be wrapped into a final proposal.
And with redevelopment, of course, the redevelopment agency had significant staff to do land use planning, all sorts of other strategic planning kinds of things that within the areas. I don't know if it's anticipated that an EIFD would have similar staffing or not. I guess it depends on the size and the scope and whether that's necessary. It could be something that's a few square blocks, in which case that wouldn't be necessary, or it could be some very significant geography where that would be very necessary. But in either event, again, that would have to be borne by the district and paid for out of the tax increment.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, just to be clear on, if we move forward with the policy today, we still have multiple steps to go through before A, the policy is finalized, B, any particular district is created, and C, whether any projects within that district is studied or analyzed. This is only the framework policy. It doesn't even apply, to Mr. O'Farrell's point when he spoke. What we're voting on today doesn't even specifically apply to the river proposal. This is a citywide policy that we're enacting.
Right.
Correct.
And everything else will be a separate action that will be taken consistent with this architecture. Okay. So I guess a couple of recommendations that I would suggest to add to the amendments that the Economic Development Committee added to the CLA's recommendations. I would ask that the feasibility studies of the district specifically analyze how economic development will be enhanced in a proposed zone, including job creation and blight reduction, changes in housing vacancy rates, and potential changes in tax revenues in all categories, not just the property tax increment, but how does it affect other revenue sources for the city of Los Angeles as well. And when EIFD feasibility studies are completed and the creation of an EIFD, or before the creation of an EIFD, I would recommend that those feasibility studies be considered by the Economic Development Committee and also by the Budget and Finance Committee before creation of any EIFD. Members, any other suggestions about the particular policy that's before us? So just to be clear, the current policy that's before us does not include a requirement of the county's involvement.
No.
But any feasibility study that would come back would obviously be a much stronger feasibility study that would be more likely to be approved by the council if it included that component as well. And that would be a matter of cooperation with the county in doing so on a specific district basis.
Right. And it's likely that a council action instructing the department to initiate a study would include instruction to work with the county to bring them into the discussion.
Okay. All right, members, any other questions, concerns, objections, proposals? All right, seeing none then, with those additional recommendations, it will be the action of the committee to concur with the Economic Development Committee and approve the CLA's recommendations in both reports dated April 12th, 2018 and January 14th, 2019, with the amendments and additional recommendations that I've indicated. Okay? No objection. If there's no objection, that will be the action of the committee.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. That will bring up item number 4.
Item number 4 is Economic and Workforce Development Department and City Administrative Officer reports relative to the City Revolving Loan Fund Administrative Plan of the United States Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration Financial Assistance Award.
Good afternoon. Thanks for your patience.
Sure. From the CAO's office, and I have EWDD here as well. My name is Shafia Amir from the CAO. Before you is our report on EWDD's transmittal regarding the draft administrative plan to establish a City Revolving Loan Fund, RLF, program for businesses as agreed with the federal U.S. Economic Development Administration, EDA, Department of Commerce. The CAO recommends approval of EWDD's draft admin plan with some revisions as described in the CAO report. We also recommend approval of EWDD's request to transfer $1.2 million from the current year unappropriated balance to EWDD. These funds were budgeted for the RLF program pending an admin plan. As background, last year in June, Council authorized EWDD to execute an agreement with the EDA to reestablish the previous city RLF program using city funds for the capital base in the total amount of $4.6 million. With last year's transfer of $1.2 million from the UB to EWDD, EWDD currently has on hand $2.1 million needed for the capital base. With the approval of the current year UB transfer pending before you, EWDD will have a total of $3.3 million in funding. Once EDA provides final approval of the admin plan, EWDD can initiate the RLF program. An additional $1.3 million has been budgeted in the adopted fiscal year 2019-20 budget, and with this amount next fiscal year, EWDD will have the full $4.6 million that was pledged for the capital base. The proposed RLF will be implemented by current EWDD staff, including outreach, intake of applications, and underwriting. EWDD is requesting no new positions. A loan committee headed by the general manager of EWDD will be formed to review applications and approve loans. The draft admin plan proposes loans ranging from $50,000 to $700,000, and exceptions for loans exceeding $700,000 will be taken on a case-by-case basis. And the city's previous EDA RLF program became defunct due to a prolonged period of noncompliance with federal grant requirements. So for the new proposed RLF program, EWDD will be responsible for maintaining adequate oversight and reporting in order to comply with EDA requirements governing the program.
Sorry, what was the previous, what was the basis for the non-compliance in the previous program?
My understanding is that, and it was through the 1980s and 1990s, so it's a really old program, and a lot of the actual data was lost, but the city originally, the program was run out of the mayor's office, but dating back to the 1980s and 90s, and eventually it was given out to a nonprofit contractor. Subsequently, the program became non-compliant because they just stopped reporting. My understanding is that there were regular reports required to EDA and accounting of funds, and that was kind of lost.
Okay.
And so for that reason, the EDA initiated these talks with the city a few years ago to kind of figure out where the plan was. So then going back, for the new proposed program, they require oversight, as mentioned. And we also added in the CIO report a requirement for the department to report back at least once a year regarding the status and whatever the council or the committee wishes to direct them to include. I believe the Economic Development Committee requested for them to report back within 3 months as well. And so details about the proposed RLF are in the CIO report, and it's attached draft, and we can answer any questions or have EWD to give some remarks as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Anything else to add?
Yeah, we're just actually really excited to be at this point reinstating the program. We've been working closely with the EDA, the funding source for this program, and they've actually looked at our administrative plan. They're happy with it. They're ready to approve it, pending, of course, City Council's approval. So we just wanted to express that we are ready to move forward with this program.
Great. Thank you. And is it anticipated that this program would have different loan underwriting standards than a private sector financial institution would have?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, we have more flexibility than the private sector does. That's our target. We want to be able to help those businesses that can't get financing at the banks or at other lending institutions.
And presumably financing would be at a reduced interest rate as well?
Well, the interest rates will be very comparable to a major bank, which are usually the lowest rates available in the market.
Okay. So this is one of the many things that I think we had talked about as a potential benefit when we were talking about the municipal bank program, but this is something that we can do internally without all of the rigmarole involved in creating an outside institution. And so I think it's terrific too. It's much needed. One thing that has been a recurring problem with some of the great pro-business programs we have is that not enough businesses know about it and know to take advantage of it. And I've, particularly in underserved communities and particularly the smallest of small businesses. So what kind of outreach program are you planning? What has already been done or what will be done to make sure that people know of their potential eligibility for this?
So we'll definitely be using the existing resources for marketing. We have our business source centers that are going to be key in promoting our program and sending us referrals and actually helping us package these loans for us. We're also going to we have our new business response unit, and we're through that unit, in constant communication with businesses that call in, and certainly we would work closely with the loan side to be able to refer businesses to this loan program. Also, we participate in a lot of community events, events hosted by the mayor's office, by nonprofit organizations. I know our loan officers, our finance officers are always out there in the community now. We're really making an effort to make sure that people do know about our programs. We have been the best kept secret, they say, but now we're making a true effort to be out there in the community and participating as many events as we can.
Yeah, I just can't stress that enough. I will never forget the time when we were sitting in this room talking about the procurement and the local business preference in procurement, and the room was filled with local and ethnic chambers of commerce presidents who had never heard of this program. And we were about 3 or 4 years into it at that point. And you know, these are great advantages for business creation and, you know, economic development, but only if people know that they can take advantage of it. So that'll be part of your report back when you come back in 90 days.
Yes.
Okay, great. Mr. Price.
Yes, this is another initiative we were excited to approve in economic development, an important tool. Excited to see that it's coming back after years and years of not being there. In addition, and I agree with the chair, outreach is going to be paramount, as we discussed in the Economic Development Committee meeting. And so again, just want to urge you, aside from the business source centers, don't forget about the council offices and the local chambers, the ethnic chambers,
Yes, absolutely.
as a way of getting the word out on this. But I think the council offices will be especially happy to help promote it amongst their small businesses. So,
Yes,
congratulations. Thank you.
Okay. Members, anything else on this? Mr. Blumenfield.
Questions. In the prior program, did we ever get the money back for the loans, or was it all loaned out and never returned?
Actually, there was a settlement where the city was able to recover $933,000 of the previous portfolio. And by reconstituting the program, we're pretty much getting a clean slate, starting the program over. And this time, definitely, you know, with more oversight and within compliance.
Do we expect a positive or negative rate of return?
Well, we always want a positive rate of return. I mean, as many of, you know, the loans that we do, the programs that we have, there are risky transactions, and we're definitely trying to circumvent and provide business assistance services along with our program to make sure that the program remains in the black. Yeah.
Because obviously, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but a negative rate of return is a program that's not sustainable unless we keep adding more money to it,
Correct.
which it may be providing other benefits that will warrant that. But I want to have our eyes wide open. Do we have a metric for success in terms of the rate of return?
Yes, and what we'll do is, as recommended by CAO, we will be reporting back on an annual basis, and we will be actually doing internal monitoring ourselves to see where we're at. We have a very efficient portfolio management unit that will help us with ensuring that we remain.
So what would be a success? Obviously, positive rate of return would be success. Can we put that out there in advance so that we understand, you know, so it's one thing to monitor it. We have no idea where it's going to go and then look at it afterwards, but it'd be nice to have a sense of what our goals are. You know, if we run out of the money in a year, that doesn't seem like a success. If it lasts for 10 years, that seems like more of a success, but I'd like to see a strategy, a game plan in advance.
Well, so one of the requirements of this EDA program would be a business expansion and job creation. It's not as onerous as the Section 108 loan program, where, you know, one job for every $35,000. This one allows us some flexibility so we can work with smaller businesses that don't have the potential to create 10 jobs at a time, but they can do two to three jobs on the first wave. And the whole idea of this program is to then turn that business bankable for the future so that the next time they need a loan in 2 to 3 years, they can go directly to a Bank of America or Wells Fargo, get that second loan, and then, you know, be able to create, you know, additional jobs.
But how many failed loans can we afford and still say the program's a success?
Right.
Okay, so we would do that kind of analysis as we get loans and we get these loans into the repayment phase. As of right now, we don't have the data to be able to give that information to you. But as we come back And we don't have to wait a year. We can do maybe a 6-month assessment of the program if you'd like. And
I'd feel more comfortable with some sort of metrics to understand how this. I'm not that comfortable just throwing the program out there and then assessing it in 6 months or a year. I'd like to have some goals as far as what we want out of this.
Absolutely. I think business expansion and job creation would be at least a couple of goals that we need to do. We need to take a look at the loan loss rates of comparable entities or CDFIs that do this on a regular basis to kind of determine what their loss rates are and try to approach it in a similar manner so that we can reduce, those rates.
Because the other way to do a program like this is exactly that, to put like a loan loss reserve and allow banks to do it, but to put that money into a structure that exists with financing folks, et cetera, but to subsidize it. We did something like that when I was at the state, where we created a loan loss reserve program.
Correct.
And that makes sense to me. We're creating a whole lot of new bureaucracy here for a very small amount of money, right? $4.6 million. I mean, how many loans do we actually expect out of that?
Well, if we anticipate let's say an average loan of $250,000, yeah, we're only looking at potentially, 10, about, 16 loans or so. But this is a revolving loan program. So the idea is, and I've already been approached, I've been talking to a lot of banks. And so one of the things they're excited about the city getting into the EDA revolving loan fund arena again, because they have CRA requirements where they need to provide lending to some of these businesses, and especially in those lower moderate income community areas, that they can go in directly. So this loan allows them to do that because we are also required to leverage our loan with some of their money, meaning they can put half of the money up front with us, and we go in second place. So,
but there's a reason the banks aren't doing these loans.
Yeah, because the risk is too high. But this loan allows us to then take that risk ourselves. But they're willing to go ahead and put in money with us so we can potentially, leverage our 4.6 to something like $10 million.
Right. And we have the in-house expertise in terms of looking at the loans and going to businesses with a good chance of success. Obviously, even though this is a really narrow area, we're looking at folks that commercial market has said is not a success, but we have that narrow band saying, well, we think they could be, they're just slightly more risk.
Yes, we have the expertise in-house. I mean, we run different programs, and not necessarily the same funding source, but it's the same type of underwriting that we do. So we're already running and managing the Section 108 loan program, the small business loan program, so the micro loan program. So we do have the in-house expertise. We do have the underwriting criteria. Is it riskier than transactions that bank will finance? Absolutely. But that's the nature of the program. That's why these programs exist.
And the loans that we make, how long are the loans for typically?
Well, the term of the loan would depend on the type of loan that we do. We can do, let's say,
on average,
maybe 5 years.
5 years. So we could do 10 loans total for $4.6 million.
Correct.
Over 5 years, we start to see the return back. So is that like 3 loans a year?
Well, hopefully we can do better than 3 loans a year. But
or if we did all 10 in the first year,
correct.
What happens in the second and third year?
Well, so just to give you an idea, I've been approached by HSBC Bank. They're looking to buy, loans from our portfolio because, again, it does come with a business that is in a low to moderate income community, and that gives them credit if they purchase a loan from us, which then we'll be able to replenish, our loan pool again. And so
if we sell the loan to
right.
someone else, but we would sell the loan, there would be a discount on that, right?
Not necessarily. It depends on the market. I mean, they're looking for this kind of deals. I don't think that we would need to take a discount at all.
Okay. Yeah, as I think this through, I'm worried about the, second, third year. I guess, or are you thinking we're going to come back and put more money in each year?
And actually, we can report back again on the success of the program, and perhaps the city council will consider adding additional funding. For now, for this program, the EDA is not adding any more money. This is just reconstituting the program that was defunct by the city. So right now it's a matter of us showing that we can maintain compliance, showing that we can do loans, either that or the EDA was seeking repayment.
And the bureaucratic, I mean, the cost for doing each of these loans is going to be pretty high, right? Because there are so few loans. One of the reasons the banks have a lower cost on the loans is because they're spreading it out over so many. What's an acceptable percentage of cost for these loans for our own administration?
Administrative costs.
Yeah.
Well, fortunately, because we do have the in-house expertise, we're absorbing, this is such a small program that we're absorbing the administrative burden of this program. So Miguel manages the microloan program, and so he's going to actually be, and we have another finance officer, and between both finance officers will be able to manage the load of this program.
Under existing
personnel, yes.
Correct.
Okay, well, I guess that's good.
Now, if, at some point this program is a great success and more money's added in, then at that point we'll do the analysis of whether we need additional staff. But for this program as it is presented to you, it would be existing staff.
And to add to that, so all the program income 50% of the program income generated by the loan program, we can keep for offsetting the operating costs, because the other 50% goes back to EDA. But at least half of that can stay.
Say that again, half of what?
Half of the program income. So all the interest earned on these loans and all the fees that we charge can stay with us, and then 50% gets remitted to EDA. We keep the other 50% to subsidize the cost of the program.
Right. Assuming that I'm assuming probably you're going to be losing money every year. You mean if you're giving half back to EDA, and I'd be surprised if you have a positive cash flow.
Right.
I mean, realistically.
Well,
am I off on that, or is that?
Well,
we're not using 100% of one finance officer, which is very expensive. So, this will be a share of one finance officer or full-time equivalent officer. If we were to loan out all $10 million, let's say a rate of, 6%, right? So we generated about $60,000 on an annual basis. That would probably cover, we might just break even.
Well, 30 of it goes back, and then 30 of it stays within the program.
Right.
In theory, okay. And then is there enough oversight on this? I mean, we get all these two-page reports and on all sorts of things.
You mean oversight from the funding agency, like EDA, or?
From EDA or
internal?
from the council?
Well, as far as oversight, right, I believe that we have all the infrastructure in place to do the oversight in-house. EDA also requires semi-annual reporting to them, and it does have some conditions and some requirements that we have to meet. So yes, and we can, again, come back every 6 months if.
All right, well, at the very least, I'd like to add that in that we get a report back every 6 months on metrics for success, on the rates, the loan loss rates,
okay.
And the expectations.
When will you be set to launch?
So upon City Council approval, we will submit the plan to the EDA, and once they approve it officially, they've given unofficial approval, but once they officially approve it, then we will be ready to start.
Okay. Anything else, members? All right, then the recommendation would be to concur with Economic Development Committee and approve the CAO's recommendations as amended to instruct the Economic and Workforce Development Department to report to Council in 90 days with an update on the implementation of the program and outreach plans and specific events that have been planned. And then, in addition, to report every 6 months after implementation with the information that Mr. Blumenfield had specified. Anything else? Okay. So with those, if there's no objection to those recommendations, that will be the action of the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there being no other business before the committee, we are adjourned.